Hi all, my name is Vishal. I'm a data analyst transitioning into machine learning research, and this channel is where I'm documenting the entire journey. I'm passionate about tiny models, resource-constrained research, and deeply understanding how things work. So in this video, I'm going to share my takeaways and reflections from the video Solo Advisory Agency, a Fireside Chat with Jason Liu, Vignesh Mohankumar, and Andy Walters, which was a fantastic conversation. Highly recommend that you watch it. And I'm going to bring these reflections and takeaways from the perspective of someone who is trying to break into this industry. So I'll kick us off with the most pivotal moment in the conversation. So the question was, what do you think is the minimum amount of professional experience to have before going full-time consulting? And here were their responses. Jason said, the thing you want to have is proof. I think it depends on what kind of things you're promising and what kind of solutions you're promising. Vignesh said, I think for the type of work I'm doing, it would be very hard to do if you were less than 5 years of experience, or really, honestly, probably 8. But it's about what you have actually done and can you actually prove it. And then Andy makes this point that it all depends on your skill set. It's about staffing your weaknesses. So as someone trying to break into the industry, how do I process these different viewpoints? I have 4 opinionated takeaways from this exchange. Again, from the perspective of someone who's trying to break into this field. Number 1, build proof publicly. Number 2, do this in a non-trivial, non-toy example setting. Number 3, be honest about your weaknesses. And number 4, learn from and talk to others who have those strengths. So for the last 2 points, I find that my portfolio is currently lacking applied AI projects. I have friends who spend most of their time working on that. So when I meet with them, I listen to the experiences they share and I ask them a lot of questions. I also actively plan my next portfolio pieces to focus on applied AI so I can build that muscle with real data. For the first 2 points, I try to exercise that muscle every day through Twitter, which is, building proof publicly and doing this in non-trivial, non-toy example settings. I do it through YouTube and my blog. I've continued to reduce the triviality of what I work on, and the benefit of always learning more is that it sustains that momentum. You're always constantly working on something that's a little less trivial than what you just did, or what you did 6 months ago. So those are my kind of 4 takeaways from that point. Let's move on to the next one. So, that initial idea of like, what is it that you need to try to build as proof? I think the second point kind of is further down the road, in the journey. And this question was, what felt like the inflection point for the way that you were able to bring in revenue or demand higher fees? So again, Jason said, for me, a lot of it was coming down to my writing, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. Vignesh said, I realize I'd rather sit there for 29 days a month and find a project-based thing that I could do for 1 day a month than work hourly. And he was talking about this idea that, having a high-value, pressing need project that is going to be more fulfilling and more interesting is, kind of that project-based thing that he's talking about. And then Andy said, getting comfortable understanding the value that your project delivers, and then increase your fee to reflect the size of the problem. So Hamel Hussein and Jason Liu have this excellent discussion on YouTube that's called Why Engineers Should Consider AI Consulting and How to Start. And then in that, they talk about how publishing free content is a viable marketing plan, and that's what they both pursue. And this really resonated with me as a Fast AI community member, encouraged by Rachel Thomas to blog since, quote, it's like a resume, only better. And after I watched Jason and Hamel's discussion, I immediately set a goal to publish 50 machine learning videos and 50 machine learning blog posts in 2025. And that has been like one of the sole driving factors for me ever since, because I saw that conversation, and even though they're in like a way different stage of their journey than I am, I'm like, I can take that. That's something I can handle. So again, I'm trying to give a perspective of how does someone trying to break into this industry process this information given by experts in the field. And I strongly think that that's low-hanging fruit, because almost anyone can blog and put content out there. And then in this video, I think hearing Jason confirm that he had high-value leads coming in directly from his blog posts was another major validation that this is a process worth investing time into. And again, it solidified my belief that the path for someone like me, without a long list of senior roles, is to build authority and trust publicly through content. Obviously, what you're writing about matters, but I think that catches up with quantity over time. And as Hamill and Jason say in that video, you gotta prioritize quantity first. And then I think Vignesh and Andy's points about chasing value instead of time spent is something I need to work on incorporating in my journey, especially when it comes to investing in productivity tools and career development. I need to be a little less rigid about spending that extra $20, $40, $60 a month to add these AI tools, because they're ultimately going to accelerate my journey. So yeah, those are my takeaways on that point. Again, lots more can be said, but speaking about AI and how we can augment our skills with it brings us to this next point. Jason says, I would be surprised if there's anybody I know that can be an individual person even doing 10 million a year. It just feels very difficult. Whereas if you just have a couple of small operational staff, you can probably get pretty far. And Vignesh was shaking his head and says, if these tools are going to keep getting better, then I don't know if there is a limit anymore at some point. So I think that is both an inspiring but also a realistic take, in my opinion. My self-prescribed limits have continuously been broken with the help of AI. It's hard for me to quantify how much of my growth in machine learning has accelerated due to AI. But anecdotally, every month, every year that I've increased my use of AI to augment, not replace, my learning and my implementation skills and my coding skills, I've accomplished tasks that I didn't expect to until way further down the road. And you could argue that every project, blog post, video I've published could not have been possible without the support of AI. Now, how this translates to getting paid and how much I get paid, only time will tell. But going back to the previous topic on when to start consulting, I think the use of AI can help build that proof needed for that zero to consulting trajectory. And it may require, as they talk about in this discussion, it may require doing a couple of free or low-paying jobs, but I think that's reasonable to expect. Now, I have a take on this that will be controversial, but I think it's an important reality for those of us starting from scratch, which is when you work for free as a beginner, you aren't just giving away labor, you are paying, quote unquote, with that labor to get the proof you need to unlock future paid work. And working for free can also look like joining a study group, joining a Discord server, and taking on tasks that need to get done. Okay. They move on in this conversation and they talk about the different methods and trajectories of going from point A to point B when it comes to consulting. And one of the questions was for Vignesh from Jason was, why didn't you join a startup or start a company versus doing your own thing? And Vignesh says, I just love it. I just love working on new problems all the time. Ideally, multiple problems at the same time. I think consulting is really interesting because you can price based on the actual value you're delivering. that keeps me going in some ways. What's the most valuable thing I can be working on? How can I help people the most? The last piece is that I just love owning the brand. Anything that I'm writing, anyone I'm meeting is all tied to me. I scale it by finding more valuable projects and more important problems. So all of these points really resonate with me. And as a hobby machine learning researcher, I value the following 5 freedoms. The freedom to start, pause, or stop a project at will. The freedom of learning and building in public without the constraints of private proprietary work. The freedom to choose my focus and my level of focus. The freedom to control my pace, going slow, going fast, going deep, staying shallow. I choose at all times which of these modes I'm in. And finally, the freedom from this kind of obsession with results and trying to get that, 0.5% extra performance, allowing me to instead chase ideas, concepts, and their clear explanation and understanding. Now, the cost of these freedoms currently is that I do this work for free. And my next frontier and my ultimate challenge is finding a situation where I can continue to have these freedoms. That's my final boss, so to speak. So moving on this topic of different paths forward into consulting or whatever, type of work that you prefer in machine learning, I think it was really interesting to see that Vignesh and Andy had, diametrically opposed preferences and paths to consulting. On one hand, you have Vignesh who says, I like coding a lot. I love writing code. I love learning things. So it works. It's like my dream, which again, awesome feeling. And then Andy said, I think I'm different than Vignesh in that I was an okay engineer, but I was never a great engineer. And I really enjoyed the relationship aspect of it, leading people, that kind of stuff. That's actually more fun to me. I like meetings. I enjoy it. It's all about figuring out what you really enjoy and pushing on that a lot. So again, I think it was awesome. And I feel really grateful that viewers got to see these diverse preferences, both leading to fulfilling consulting ML careers. And ultimately, while landing paid work is goal 1B, doing what I enjoy and excites me is 1A. And this really confirmed my motivation. I can't imagine a path where I don't spend 75% or more of my time coding, learning about coding, or reading research papers. Basically just a continuation of what I'm doing now with my free time. And again, my challenge is to figure out how to get there. And that leads me to this next point from Andy, which I think was really inspirational and I think just awesome to hear. So Andy says, I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is it's all about breaking your context into the next level. There is this cascading series of contexts you have to break yourself into, and it's always uncomfortable and it feels painful and risky. Keep pushing, keep growing, and even when it doesn't work the first time, you just keep pulling the thread. It's surprising how far you can get. We firmly believe that over the next 5 years, there's at least $1 trillion of integration services on the table for companies to integrate AI into their offerings. The work is literally falling off the trucks. It's out there to seize. Go seize it. So that idea of cascading contexts that you're constantly breaking through, the idea that you have to just keep pulling the thread, even though if it doesn't feel like it works or you keep failing. I think that is ultimately, the goal. And I think that's ultimately where you want to be. Like when you're constantly pushing yourself to grow and take on that next challenging context, you will find yourself working at the edge of your knowledge and capacity. But I think this is an ideal place to be. However, the downside is never truly knowing or feeling how much you have progressed, right? Like if you're in a constant state of, I'm stuck on X and I need to resolve it so I can get to Y, and then I'm stuck on on X2, I need to resolve it so I can get to Y2. Like you're constantly just solving problems to get to the next problem, to solve that problem, and to get to the next problem, and so on. I think documenting your journey through writing blog posts, tweeting, creating videos, helps balance this bleeding edge approach by concretely and quantitatively showing what you have learned and how much you have achieved, so you can start to see the evidence and the proof actually compound, right? You're just, stacking those days. Andy's point that the work is literally falling off the trucks, I think should be inspiring to everyone, regardless of whether or not you want to pursue consulting. I do think we are still in the very early stages of AI adoption, no matter how much we want to be convinced that we have, broken through certain levels of performance. There's still a lot of implementation work that needs to get done. And it can seem falsely, in my opinion, that the field of AI is accelerating at an unsustainable pace. But I think what is unsustainable is actually that veneer that we are, going at this breakneck speed. I don't think that's actually true. I think fundamentals still matter. I think communicating concepts clearly still matters. And I think these are relatively low-hanging fruit that we can access. Those of us who are not yet in the industry, I think we can access these things as long as we can put forward that effort, that time, and do so with tenacity. All right, so with that, I'm going to bring us to my closing thoughts with this xkcd comic. So, closing thoughts. So, to be honest, I don't know where my ML journey is going to take me, and I would imagine that those of us who are in this kind of hobby ML, doing it in our free time while doing another job, while being in school, while whatever the case may be, there's this uncertainty of like, how is this going to unfold? And we have ups and downs in this uncertainty, right? Like when I'm feeling optimistic, I can imagine myself working in an organization or working independently with the same joy, excitement, freedom, and challenge that I feel while working on my own personal projects that I choose in my free time. And then on the other hand, on my worst days, I do honestly wonder if I will ever leave, this purgatory of hobby machine learning. And I think the key to my success is going to be consistent, regardless of what I'm feeling, right? You feel up, you do the work. You feel down, you do the work. It's like, it's that kind of championship mentality we hear about in the sports, right? In sports, like you don't let one play or you don't let one game shift your focus. You focus on the process. You focus on the standard, right? The standard is what you're chasing. You're not chasing any of these kind of other unnecessary noise. Hearing Andy talk about staffing weaknesses and then hearing Vignesh talk about AI raising the ceiling made me reflect on my own approach. And I think, when it comes to using AI and what capabilities it will unlock for me, I keep waiting for the choir of angels that we see here. But instead, I've found this like steady plodding forward task to task. I think Vignesh is right about AI removing the ceiling. And I think Andy is right about supplementing your weaknesses with other strengths. And I think you can combine those two concepts. And when you combine those two concepts, I think my task is to become, number one, more aware about what my current ceiling is, what my current weaknesses are, like what am I avoiding, what am I in denial about? And number two, understanding how to augment these weaknesses with AI. And this is challenging because there is a kind of sycophantic nature of AI that makes it difficult to use it for identifying my weaknesses. Something I found success with lately was I asked Claude, I gave it kind of my next 6 months plan or next 14 months plan. Here's what I'm thinking of doing by next summer. And I asked it to be a hard ass. I'm like, explicitly, be a hard ass and tell me what you think. And then I asked it, once I gave it its response, I asked it to critique the hard ass. And then it finally kind of came to this, balanced, relatively balanced approach. Again, not too high, not too low, not mean, not overly agreeable. And then I've also found that Gemini 2.5 Pro is better for such questions. I think it's more straightforward and informative, and it's less of a coach slash cheerleader. But ultimately, I do think everything is in front of me and there for me to seize. And conversations like these between industry experts, people who have, figured out these hard problems in terms of career development, I think these conversations help galvanize that feeling with real proven evidence. So my main takeaway from this is, whatever path that you're on currently in your ML journey, I think if you can afford to, in terms of time and money, if you can follow your excitement, I think that does seem to be the main key with everyone that I listen to. And ultimately, that excitement will lead to the highest quality of work that you can put out there. And number two is put out as much work as you can. Blog everything that you can possibly blog. Tweet about it, videos about it, talk to other people about it. So that was my summarization of the solo advisory agency Fireside chat. I will put the link to that video in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this kind of new format of video that I'm doing. I certainly plan on doing more. I will see you next time.